Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dan Kinsman here with the Tech on Deck podcast. I am joined today by Officer Brent Hoover. You might know him from social media, Facebook, TikTok. I'm trying to think what was popular back when you were everywhere. But he was the instructive and informative Officer Hoover from Indiana Highway Patrol Commercial Motor Vehicle Enforcement, correct?
That is correct. Indiana State Police Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Division.
Okay, so Officer Hoover, tell us a little bit about how you got into this line of work, this profession.
Well, so a little bit about me. Like I said, my name is Brent Hoover. I'm a master trooper with the Indiana State Police. Basically, master trooper, all that designates is I've hit the 20-year mark or the 15-plus year mark. So I'm a road trooper that's assigned to our Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Division. I've been in our Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Division a little over 15 years now. Been on the department just over 20 years. So definitely getting to the point of the downhill, a little bit downhill slide. So it's kind of interesting to see these young guys come out and be stopping these commercial drivers, and they're born after the year 2000. That really makes you, when you look at a CDL and you look at it, you're like, you're not 21. And then you got to sit there and count and go, oh, they're 23 already. Dang, But no, and I've been in the commercial vehicle enforcement side for a little over the last 15 years. I'm a Part B instructor. So what Part B is actual truck inspection portion. So there's different courses you go through when you become a commercial truck inspector. You have our Part A, which really discusses driver's licensing, operating authority, hours of service, and then that once you pass that course, that allows you to go what we call it on our side of the fence, a level 3 inspection or a paperwork inspection. So if a driver gets stopped and the inspector comes up and says, hey, I'm just doing a level 3, they've been through the Part A portion. And then to tack on to that, you go through a Part B school. And the Part B is where you really learn the nuts and bolts and brakes and all sorts of stuff, load securement, how to really inspect the commercial motor vehicle. I've been a Part B instructor for the last, 5 years now. In the last couple of years, I've added a master instructor certification to my resume, meaning I can go out now and work with new instructors to do that. So
Train the trainer type stuff.
Exactly, train the trainer type stuff. And then I'm also hazmat cargo tank certified. Not nearly as fun as just the regular truck stuff. So if you guys pop up with any hazmat, I'll have to say I've got guys that'll help me out with that, and I'll definitely look that up and get your question answered later. But and then added motor coach inspections to that, so I kind of run the full gamut. I'm also a field training officer, meaning any new inspectors for our agency, I can field trade them as well. So. It's probably been 5 or 6 years ago, start in social media. I just started kind of, just during my roadside normal day to day, I just interact with drivers and it kind of started off. I kind of had a pretty Pete of the day picture where if I saw a pretty Peterbilt, I'd stop him, inspect him, chat with him, take a picture, ask, hey, you care if I share this on my Facebook? And then started friending more and more drivers, and then got a driver out of Wisconsin. He had already a big Facebook following, and then when he tagged, I met this Officer Hoover guy in Indiana. He was pretty cool. That kind of just blown up, and then it kind of turned into something, and then started working on the department. Allowed me to start this Facebook page, Indiana State Police Commercial Vehicle Enforcement, to where we could kind of share some tips and things to look for on inspections. really my personal goal was to really educate. I really, with all the instructing stuff I do, class stuff I do, I really found that the roadside drivers just need more education. Um,
Yeah.
I would stop a driver and he'd be fairly new, and I'd see all these load securement issues. And I'd be like, hey, bud, how much training have you had on this? And usually the answer was very minimum. Or the
Yep.
driver told me, yeah, just throw it here, throw a strap here, chain it here. And there wasn't any organized trainings that was going on. So I kind of held little roadside trainings. And I remember stopped a gentleman. He was hauling a big oversized excavator and didn't have enough chains. And I said, and he goes, I'm struggling here. And he goes, I'd appreciate any help you can give me. And we sat there for another hour. I was running through load securement, the regulations and what you're required to do. So that really fueled my feelings of, the more I can do this, the more I can outreach, the more I can educate. Yeah, I could have wrote him a ticket and just parked him. But
That's not going to teach him anything.
that exactly, that's
That's
not gonna, that's not, and I do get frustrated when I hear of folks have bad interactions with inspectors, because
yeah.
then that driver kind of leaves a bad taste in their mouth that every inspector is going to be like that. And I always try to no, let's have a good interaction. So in a in a long rundown on me, that's kind of who I am and where I'm currently at.
So that's your frustrations with load securement with that gentleman. That's kind of how I came into meeting the other founder, the actual founder of FSSG, Flatbed Safety Securement Group. Was I did a local run. Usually my run, 80% of the time, I had a 15-mile round trip. I'd load 2 or 3 coils, about 70,000 pounds on my trailer, and take it 15 miles under a special permit down to our one facility. And of course, the DOT officers, initially I was new to it, they checked me out quite a few times, and they got to find out that I'm very particular about how my chains are, how my truck is, that everything's in perfect condition. After, I think, 3 years of running that truck, doing that route, occasionally I'd go past the scales in Hubbard, Ohio. And one day I was going past the scales not long before I was actually going to be leaving that job. And DOT officer inside, stopped me on the scale. I knew I was legal. I'm like, I didn't know why he stopped me. He's like, hey, can you pull around back? There's a driver back here that needs some help. And they also had learned that I had become a trainer for our company.
Mm-hmm.
My specialty was load securement, because with my job, I was very particular about everything done right. From the straps that we carried to the chains, everything was done correctly so that you would get home and others would get home. And I went around back, and guy had a load of roofing shingles. Should be an easy, straightforward load. He had no idea. His company gave him the keys to the truck, told him to hook up to the trailer, and just, what you need is on there, figure it out. And I spent about an hour and a half, 2 hours. Luckily, that job, I was paid by the hour, not by the load or the mile. I was paid by the hour. So, yeah, I got paid for some time to spend time with the driver, but teaching him how to do the load securement, and finding out, he had no training, nothing. He was just, here you go, figure it out. So, got in the truck after showing him how to take his straps off, put his straps the correct way, how to do the X strap because, it's a flatbed. It's palletized load. You have to have something to keep it moving forward. So, did all that, and I got in the truck, and I'm like, there's got to be a Facebook page I could recommend to him or something so that he, on his next load, he won't get into the same position. And I found the Flatbed Safety Securement Group, and that became a case of, I posted up a lot of pictures of, I did coils, so skidded coils, racked coils, penny coils, stand-ups, the eye to the side, eye to the rear, um, and then sheet loads and loads of. We have little tiny sheets that we call them blanks. They're usually they're like 6 inch by 6 inch little cubes, but 200 pounds of steel. Like showing how you secure those and all that stuff that most drivers probably wouldn't ever experience, but it gives you an idea of, hey, these are other strange items that I might need to chain down or strap down in the future. And that grew into, well, this, where we're pushing it more to have more education, to have more knowledge for the industry. And even going branching out beyond that, uh, like the post was recently put up on our page asking about the reflective strips on the back of the truck, the reflective tape on the back of tractors, and it's like that's the kind of stuff that we're here for, and even further education to drivers so that they aren't. We want to make our page and our group a page where everybody can interact in a way that no question is dumb, but every question will get an honest answer with the law to back it up.
Oh, absolutely, and that's something that um, even to this day, when I'm one of those that they kind of harp on me sometimes. You're print. What are you using all this paper for? I will, if I see a violation and I can tell that driver's like, huh? I really like to show them in the book or print the regulation off, or even as far as I went through and made like a load securement cheat sheet that I should send you. It's, it kind of shows you how to calculate and lets flatbedders know, hey, if you're hauling something, don't forget you do have to secure the length and the weight, and where these regulations come from, because too many times I've seen or heard stories directly from drivers where they're like, well, an inspector told me this is the way it's got to be, and that's it. And then it's like, well, but here's the regulation. Here's exactly what it says. So
Yeah.
I don't take my word for it. I'm just showing you in the book, and I, and I love it. Some years ago, I go walking up and was discussing a logbook short haul. This was before they changed, the mileage and everything around a little bit. And asked the driver, I said, I need to see your logbook. And he goes, well, do you have one of these? And he holds up one of those little green, regulation books. And I'm like, yeah, I've got the big version in my car. And he goes, well, the boss told me this little book says I don't need a logbook. And I was like, okay, well, tell you what, you show me in your little green book, and I'll go back and I'll get my big green book and we'll compare notes. So I went back and I printed stuff. I highlighted, made a map of where he was coming, where he was going. I was ready. For that argument, and came back up and had my stack of paperwork and had everything ready. And then I go, well, show me in your book. And he goes, I gave up. He goes, I'll go with whatever you tell me. And I'm like, oh, come on. You prep me for a fight. Let's argue. But no. And I found that when you're honest with people and you show them, here's where it is. And I learned early on, after I got to be an instructor, just an inspector. I had an older guy that had been instructed, and we joked that he did the level 1 inspection on Noah's Ark when it finally hit. He had been doing it that long, and I understood something as well. Every truck has to have a logbook, and you got to have your previous 8 days. So it was like, okay. And I asked the driver, I said, well, where's your 8 days? And he goes, well, I run local. And I was like, yeah, thinking, well, that's what. And he goes, here, inspector at a scale house printed this off for me, and it was an interpretation to the regulation. And at the time, I was still green, wet behind the ears. And, where most inspectors would go, I don't want to see that and stand their ground. I was like, yeah, let me see that. And I went back and took that, looked in my book, found the interpretation, was like, okay, I was taught wrong. I was
Yeah.
taught wrong. And I've always learned that lesson. And I always tell that story to these new inspectors that you've got to go out there and you've got to research. And if you're going to stand there and tell that driver something, you need to have good framework and know exactly where you're getting that from the regulations. So if I know it's in regulations, I'm going to stand true to it. If I waver, hey, let's look that up together and find out. I'm willing to say, hey, you're absolutely right, and go, you know what? I learned something. So that's something I wish a little more of my counterparts would adopt. But like everything else, at the end of the day, it's a certain type of personality that becomes a law enforcement person, and just a typical alpha personality. No one likes to be told they're wrong, but we need to understand it's a big book, and you could be taught something, and I could be taught something, and depending on
one of the things, I actually had a student with me, and at the time, I mean, I had a decade plus of driving. So I'm training the student, and one of the other drivers I knew didn't work for the same company, but he calls me up. He's like, dude, I just got a ticket because I didn't have rubber underneath my coil rack. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, the officer printed it up. And it's like, yeah, the friction mat isn't for the coil to not slide against wood, because steel's not going to slide on wood. It's for when you lay those coil racks down on an aluminum deck, and now you've just got metal on metal. Well, that's no friction. That's why they're called friction mats. And he's like, and the officer got up inside my Conestoga. I didn't know they were allowed to do that. And he's like, the officer looked at the front of the trailer and said, you've got a man hatch and you don't have a lock on it. I'm going to do a load inspection. I'm not going to make you open the trailer up, but I can get inside the trailer because you don't have a lock. And he was like, yeah, well, that officer knows that's not an issue. He can climb up into the trailer. It's not secured. It's just there. Well, and I was like, huh. And I kind of had to take a step back and think about it. I'm like, yeah, I guess when we looked up the law, I went to my safety director for my company, and we all pulled up the law, and we're like, well, that's a gray area, but it is referring to, hey, let's, have something to increase friction so that metal on metal doesn't slide around as easily.
Oh, absolutely. And even like secured loads, lock loads, if we can articulate that it's something in there that if it would shift and cause the vehicle to be in a collision, so like obviously steel, that's something. And even if there was a lock, hey, that's your lock. Can we open that up? Look at the load securement. Now if I look at a bill of lading and it's pillows or paper plates or something that's, if it falls over, if it's something that falls over, it's not going to affect, then yeah, our articulation is maybe not gotten in, or the urgency to get in and inspect the cargo is a whole lot less. So
yeah, and like this was an officer up by Cleveland. We have all the steel trucks up there.
Oh yeah. He's done more steel than I'll ever lay eyes on. Absolutely.
Yeah, and a lot of the older officers, some of the young kids don't realize that are coming into the industry. Those older officers, especially the ones closer to retirement, back in the day, they might have driven trucks on the weekend. Monday through Friday, they were the DOT officers. Saturday, though, pick up a little extra money on the side. They'd run a steel truck, and
they were out there running 3 logbooks and knew how to. No,
yeah.
But
it's like, and that's why they know where to hide. You're like, I'm going to go around the scale. It's like, why do you think they know?
Catch you?
Yeah, I've got the schedule to the scales in my pocket. I know it's closed, but and that brings up a good point. a lot of the inspectors have that um, hands-on capability. Like we hired a new civilian motor carrier inspector at our scale facility. She's got 20 years as a driver under her belt.
Yeah.
And she goes, and when we were working together in training, she goes, I've learned more about how the mechanical truck side works in your class than I learned after 20 years of driving. So, and it's nice to have that background. Before they mandated that you had to have a CDL program in school and all that, I went and got with a local buddy of mine.
Allison says,
And
can I eat the sandwich cookie, please?
And went and got my own CDL, my Class A CDL. And now, I've got a CDL, and I went through the pre-trip. I went through the driving. I went through all that because, one, I wanted to know whether, basically, I wanted to have that background. I wanted that ability to tell this driver, hey, I've gone through a CDL testing. I got my Class A CDL.
Officer Hoover had a Class A CDL. That's awesome.
Yes. No hazmat endorsement, and I even got my manual transmission. I wanted old school Class A. I didn't want the no manual transmission.
There's not one driver now that could say, Officer Hoover, you can't tell me what to do. You've never driven a truck before. You don't have a CDL. Yes, I do.
And I'm waiting on that. I'm still waiting on that interaction. Like, boom, here's my driver's CDL return. I got to go poked and prodded and everything else.
That is so cool.
But and I did that because I wanted to be able to articulate and have that experience of I went through that same thing.
It showed the real passion for the industry that you're in too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
and it shows when you're doing the inspections and when you're talking to, even when you might be given like a speech to, like if you get to go to an Indiana Trucking Association or something like that, like you're not just an enforcement officer. You can get in the truck and you can actually drive it. You know how to do that. It's not like you're enforcing something that you have no idea. I can look in the dash, but I don't actually know what half that stuff means. You actually know.
Exactly. And that's something that to me, because sometimes you hear that those that can't teach, and I never appreciated that. I never liked that. I've ran across instructors, and not in law enforcement, but in school and college, and always like you got that PE teacher that weighs 450 pounds, and and yet it's telling you to climb the rope, and you're like, why don't you climb the rope? But yeah.
So, like when we were talking about the coils, like one of the things that a lot of guys want to do. Now, I as a trainer, I used to tell my students, especially since we did a lot of coils in the Youngstown area. I'm in the Youngstown, Ohio area. Like we have a ton of coils and steel hauling. But I used to always tell them, like, hey, do one coil rack per about 10,000 pounds of coil. So if you have a 50,000 pound coil, 5 coil racks under it, 48,000 pound, go up to 50, and then chain it the same way. Like plan your chains out according to rounding up to a higher number. But as far as I know, I don't believe there's any. There was a time when I used to see coil racks had a rating on them, a load rating. But I don't believe they do that anymore, do they?
I have not seen that, and in the regulations, when it talks about ratings and working load limits, as I'm sure you're aware, it only states the load securement. So yeah, there's and ironic because a driver friend of mine, and I say that a lot, all the time, who's texting you? And I'm terrible with names, so I'm like, I don't know. He's a driver. So that's my wife's common response. Who's texting you? I don't know, a driver with a question. But a little bit ago, driver had a question, and it was about a steel coil rack. And they had your typical rack, and then there was a wedged piece of wood, like a 6x6 they'd cut. And he's like, can they have that wood? And it's like, for us, as long as it's not cracked, broken, coming out to where it's going to allow that coil to rock and roll, there's really nothing against that. And everything we talk about with load ratings or working load limit ratings is all the securement. So like these aluminum trailers, those J hooks. Yeah. I don't know if you've seen it. I'm sure you have, but they've got a new style of a J hook, but it's got a piece that's bolted on it that allow the chain to hook into it and kind of move a little bit and articulate. I thought that was pretty neat. I was like, that's good. And talking to the company, they do permitted oversized big coils. So they said they've really been pleased with the way they've been working. So
yeah, that was Extreme Manufacturing created those.
Yes.
And they're rated for, if I remember correctly, 7,100 pounds or something. They've got a really high rating.
Yes, they are.
They still have the slot. The top of it is still designed that a strap can hook into that top.
Yes, it was a strap or a chain or yeah,
phenomenal design.
Yeah. So it was neat.
Really,
to see that.
Yeah, that's one area though that like we work so hard on our load securement for the chains for the J plates, but then with coil racks, it's like, man, some of those coil racks,
they get used and abused. They get used and abused. I've picked up a few along the road just falling off of stuff, and you look at it and go, man. And I had a new inspector with me, and they go, what is that? And I said, well, that's a rack for steel coil. I'm like, they put this, and then they could put a board down, and that's where they cradle and drop the coil on. So
when I did the dedicated run doing the coils, I actually had my company, they were nice enough to agree with me that the normal coil racks we would get from the truck stop, we were really running through them at a high rate of speed. My truck especially, just because of the number of coils I was doing. You drop 5-6 coils a day in each rack, and you got 3 racks on the truck. It doesn't take
entirely way too much work, Daniel.
You know what? Looking back at it, I was young and dumb, and it just I think some days I spent more time throwing chains than I spent driving, just because of the amount of chains I'd have to throw on each load, and then I was only driving 10 minutes down the road. But they actually built me heavy duty coil racks that they were fully reinforced. And then I started looking at like the steel, the difference between it. It's like, man, this heavy duty rack that they got, this might be $80 per rack, but you'd have to put serious weight on it. I used those racks for a year and a half, never had a single one that even had bent. They were more adjustable. They held coils better. They had them built for us so that we could, because sometimes I'd haul a 48,000 pound single coil. Sometimes I'd have two 35,000 pound coils. Then other times I'd have 3 or 4 little tiny 18,000 pound coils. So it gave me positions where I could put the boards in different positions to have the coil properly supported. That's another area that I really stress to my students is you don't want the coil sitting too high. The book actually gives, well, I believe it still does, but it used to give a window of like the coil can't be like 6 inches off the deck, but it also can't be sitting on the deck.
Now, do the coil racks have to be inside the width of the coil? That's another argument.
I mean, I don't know. Do you know that, Officer Hoover?
Well, let's go to the regulation for that.
Yeah, a bunch of interesting questions.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's just it. Like I ask, when people, it's funny, they go, do you get a lot of questions? I'm like, oh yeah, and I tell them I ask them, what's the book say? And then they're like, oh, I haven't looked at the book. I just called you. And I'm like, that's not the correct answer. Like, let's look at.
Me and Mr. Kinsman here, we trained an AI to understand the ECFRs, specifically for FSSG. So whenever there's a question inside the group that pertains to regulations, we'll take that question and we'll put it inside of our AI, and it'll immediately find the regulation for it, so that the member has the answer. It'll cite the regulation code, the actual code for regulation, word for word. That way we can give the member the actual regulation for the questions they're asking.
And that's smart. That's valuable, because you get so many of these truck stop lawyers, and
we definitely leverage technology to help FSSG,
yeah,
help others. I think that's what's really launching FSSG is our ability to embrace technology.
oh yeah, and so like in 393-120, what are the rules for securing metal coils? And then it talks about in transported with eyes crosswise on a flatbed, a means, example, timbers, chalks or wedges, a cradle, etc., to prevent the coil from rolling. The means of preventing rolling must support the coil off the deck and must not be capable of becoming unintentionally unfastened or loose while the vehicle's in transit. If timbers, chalks, wedges are used, they must be held in place by coil bumps or similar devices to prevent them from coming loose. The use of nailed blocking or cleats as a sole means to secure timbers, chalks, wedges, or nailed wood cradle is prohibited. So that's the extent
that they go to.
So yeah, you've got a great question. Like, well, how far apart? You know, how far is it supposed to have the coil up off the deck? And for me, that's one of those, I can't answer that question specifically. I can just go to the regulation and say what
it has
supposed
the limit of what it says is it has to cradle it. So cradle it, it has to at least not be on the deck.
Exactly, because it says support the coil off the deck. So,
yeah,
you know, technically, if they had the coil and it touches the deck, they're in violation of Section C1. And
so
then
it would have to be within the width of the coil.
Yeah, and you would think common sense would dictate it'd have to be, you know, to properly support it. And then
I'm guilty of going outside the width a couple times.
So and then relying on the wood keeper.
With what I did, sometimes I'd have 2 or 3 different sizes. You know, the company has contracted to. We'd take a master coil. I'd bring one of the big ones in. They'd cut them into 3 or 4 small ones. Sometimes I'd go from 48 inches wide. They'd go down to like 12 inches. Or we had penny coils that were about an inch wide.
Huh.
But like we had to get used to like, okay, so you're going to put these coil racks down here, and then what you're going to do is you're only getting 16,000 pounds, but you have to put 6 racks down because you're going to take and put a coil rack where the 2 coils are going to be touching, because this coil is going to be this heavy and this big a diameter. This one's going to be this big a diameter. And you'd have to figure out how to make sure that each one was supported and off the deck, but then was also being supported by the coil rack, because if you didn't, that would get kind of sketchy, as that wood wanted to split under the weight of those 2 coils pushing apart.
Oh, absolutely on that. And it's neat for me to be able to sit and talk to you guys about this, because we do see steel coils around my area. I'm in the Putnamville. I'm on the western side of the state, right along. In fact, I can be to the Illinois state line in about 5 minutes from where I'm at now. So we get a lot of, Terre Haute's got a steel place. So we do see steel coils and yeah, but we don't see that wide variety of coils. And we were talking like the violations and stuff. What guys sometimes don't understand is, like, you had an example, say the coil was touching and the cradles weren't supporting it off. Well, now that's a violation. And that simple little violation, you think, oh, that's not really a big deal. But once you violate that load securement regulation, you're now out of service. So getting these drivers to understand, especially with you guys are instructing and teaching them, it's like you need to understand you've got to follow this to the T, because if you get stopped and that inspector sees that, one little mistake like that, you're now out of service. And you're out of service right there. You're not allowed to, oh, well, I'll drive down to my drop off and get it fixed. No. So it's going to be a bigger headache.
Have you ever pulled somebody over, wrote them out of service for an unsecured load, and then be like, well, can I just fix it and be on my way? Can I just put my strap here? Can I move this? What's your response to that?
That's a good question. That's a good question. So there are some out of services, depending on what it is, that you're out of service here. Somebody's got to come and fix this. So like given that example, say that coil, that cradle's not supporting that coil. That's going to have to be we got to call a wrecker to lift the coil, rearrange. That's going to be lengthy. But let's say when we looked further down, it had a certain way the coil has to be chained. You know, so in one position it's got to be crossed, in another position it's got to be 45. Well, let's say that he didn't have enough chain. Well, that would be an out of service, but the driver could fix it. Yes. He could fix it himself. And I've had plenty of them go, hey, this is an out of service violation. I'm going to go back to the car. I'm going to talk or, get my paperwork typed up. You're out of service. Start working on it and fix it. And I've had drivers, they've got it fixed, corrected by the time I get the paperwork done and back up there to them. And then, of course, and then they're like, oh, I fixed it. Yeah, but I had to tell you to fix it. If you had it on your own, it's like, think about it. If I hadn't stopped you today and you continued to do it wrong, could you have made the evening news of being the coil coming off the trailer? So
it's like that video I saw you post you made it a while ago, but I saw the post the other day. It was of the lug nuts on the tires. Of you can have one here, one missing here, but if I put you out of service, you can't pull one here and put it over here. Oh, I lost it. I thought that was the funniest thing ever.
Yep. So.
Oh yeah. And I don't know how the videos are getting on TikTok nowadays. I have more people. There's been a resurgence on the page and stuff. They're like, oh, I see all over TikTok. And I'm like, I don't know how. I guess that's pirates of the TikTok. But hey, as long as it's out there hitting the news and people are learning something, I'm all about that.
Yep. So another topic we were going to kind of ask you about a little bit was, so we do have, amongst other things, we are working with technology, tech on deck. One of the things we have is we have a gentleman that has created a system, a sensor that he can put on straps called Strap Sentry. It will actually alert the driver if straps come loose. So once you'd get the strap tightened over a load, you'd actually put the Strap Sentry on, arm it, and it would let him know if it was loose. That's a big area that I feel like a lot of guys don't think about doing flatbed, that, hey, once you tarp over your straps or you've got a tarp load inside a Conestoga, it's not necessarily, you still have to stop and check the straps. And just because it isn't necessarily blowing in the breeze, if it's outside of the tarp, doesn't mean it's not loose. So, and like, how do you handle those as an officer? If you see a loose strap, is it something where that's out of service, or you just pull them over and like, hey, make sure that strap gets tightened?
No, that's a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up. So we'll kind of go through and we'll start at the beginning and end on the technology. So when we look at inspecting, like you said, just because you're loading in California, going to deliver in North Carolina, and you've tarped your load, that doesn't mean that you're done. Per the regulations, per 392.9, it says that the driver has to re-examine the commercial motor vehicle's cargo and its load securement devices during the course of transportation and make any adjustments. And it goes on to say that they have to inspect the cargo and the devices used to secure the cargo within the first 50 miles of picking up the load. And then the commercial motor vehicle has been driven for 3 hours or 150 miles, or whichever occurs first. So I had and as far as that kind of leads me to when I have these flatbeds and I do see loose straps and I get that bill of lading and see that they're maybe 200 miles, I kind of ask them, hey, have you checked your straps since you left? No, I haven't. Okay, well, you do have a strap loose. And did you know you're required to check this within the first 50 miles? And the next, no, I never heard that. Never heard that. Okay, well, technically you're in violation of that as well. You just admitted to nope, you didn't inspect. Now, that's being pretty particular, but in the course of an accident investigation, now it starts to really, that's where it really comes to light. And guys think sometimes that inspectors are a bit picky or a bit overzealous at times. It's not that. It's from the fact that there's regulations like this that you have to inspect that.
The load securement regulations, this is something I really stressed to my students, was load securement regulations were written in blood.
Exactly.
And to this day, they are still being reminded by blood. It is drivers that they don't want to. I've hauled this coil 23,000 times going from this point to this point. I know how everything works. It's just going to be real quick. Yeah, but that's not an excuse to skimp on straps, to skip on your load securement.
Exactly. And I had a driver, he's like, well, I've done this for 20 years and I've never had a problem. You've been lucky the last 20 years.
That's the problem in the industry, is drivers who are stuck in their ways of, for the last 20 years I've done it this way. Get with the times, guy. It's over the last 20 years, everything's changed. You have to constantly learn in trucking, or you can't just get comfortable. That's how people get hurt. That's one thing FSSG really stands on, is you have to continually train to be safe.
And absolutely.
I mean, I've been out on the road since I was 7 years old, about 20 years now. And like 20 years ago, the traffic difference, well, actually 30 years, almost 30 years now, 29 years. Like the traffic difference from when I got on the road, A, trucks were mostly cab overs and they didn't fly anywhere. And B, the traffic difference, people paid attention, but there just wasn't as much traffic. The stuff that you could get away with 30 years ago, you just can't do nowadays because people aren't paying attention.
And you nailed it on the head there. You nailed it on the head there, because the amount of traffic, the amount of distracted driving, and we can say it on both ends, all spectrums.
Oh yeah.
And we could sit here all day and talk about cars and trucks distracted, but yes, distracted driving, all of that. You mentioned, 30, 40 years ago, trucks, now there's more power, there's better braking, which leads to higher speeds, which leads to, all of that. Exactly.
I'm a big supporter of, we need to bring cab overs back and let drivers spend their first year or two in a cab over. Because they'll learn real quick why you don't want to tailgate another truck. Because you see these guys out there, they have this sense of security of, I got that hood in front of me so I can get right up behind this truck. It's like, it don't work like that.
Yes, and then they get accustomed to this adaptive cruise control and all this, and getting away from the CBs and saying, hey, 5 miles up ahead, there's something on the shoulder slowing up traffic. Exactly.
I
Exactly.
just changed jobs. And I went from a old Kenworth T800. I mean, it was a 2023, I believe it was, model
It
year.
looked like a 1987.
Yeah, but I mean, Kenworth, they know what works and they haven't changed it much. Then I went into a new International LT, and it's like, man, the technology difference, the things that beep and buzz and tell you
Oh,
how to drive.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. And
And
I just came back from a CVSA, Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, and that's the partnership between the feds and industry and enforcement, and we were talking different technologies that, like, part of the truck inspection is to have the driver release the brakes but yet have the door open so we can see. And now trucks are getting so smart that once that door pops open, if the brakes aren't set, it's setting the brakes. And and we're basically having to rewrite how we inspect these newer vehicles because of this added technologies on
yeah,
things. So
I got a brand new truck years ago. I was working with Hunt Transportation out of Omaha, Nebraska. I got one of their very first Freightliners they had bought in years. I had 289 miles on it. Pulled into the Iowa scale house, and the officer in there was like, they knew the company. The company's owned by Crete and Schaefer. Is very, very strict on maintenance. And the officer's like, so, brand new truck. I'm like, yep. He's like, do you mind? We have some graduates. This is their first day out of the schoolhouse. I'm going to have them go through and inspect your truck because I know everything's going to be all right. I was like, yeah, but I got to warn you. When you tell me to release the brakes and then open the door, I said, it blows the air horn 4 times.
yes.
And he's like, it won't be that bad. He had 3 students go through it, and he's like, time out. We're just going to have to cut this short, guys, the ones that have been under the truck. You
Yeah.
did good on training. The rest of you, I don't have the brain to handle this today. My head is throbbing. I'm like, yeah, I know, right?
Yes.
But, you know, well, okay, so part of our strap sentry, the strap sentry thing is
Yes.
the driver, the inventor of it, he actually has it set up that it can Bluetooth to a phone to let the driver know.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about, so amongst other things, with the tech, we are both very much supporting how tech can help the driver and also DOT. So we're looking at the possibility of trying to give you an ability that you could drive by a truck. Right now, he designed the strap sentry for 1 to 2 inch straps. So even for a van trailer, you could drive by a vehicle and it would actually alert you, hey, this trailer's got these straps. These straps were put on and activated like they are securing the load, but they're all loose now, which means there could be a load shift inside the trailer or something like that. Like you'd be able to do a electronic, like a whole new level of inspection where you're doing an electronic inspection. Like,
Well, and that's really interesting because as they're advancing with the roadside capabilities, like they're wanting to add a level. I and don't quote me on it, but it's a certain level to where it it'll scan different aspects of the truck. Like we've got a system to where we can scan the plate, scan the for the DOT number, and by the time the truck hits the scale, we can see a background on that vehicle. And they're wanting to get it to where it's a little more instantaneous than that. That you basically put in, okay, um, Dan, you're the driver of truck 123, and you head out. Then you pass our scale, and it'll show us, okay, Dan's driver, he's got a valid license, his ELD's not showing any indications, trucks, da 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 da, and it'll enter it as a electronic inspection. So technology like that, yeah, that would really be a neat thing, and that would be neat to see as they advance to the 3 and 4 inch straps. And you'd kind of mentioned earlier in your question, like, when a strap's loose, how do we kind of handle that? Well, as you well know, there may be a case where, hey, you got to have 4 straps on this particular load and one of your 4 is loose. Well, now that's not a service to where if, okay, you got 4, but you got 5 on there and it's loose, it's not going to be an out of service, but it could still be a defective. So
That's
yeah,
why we preach over
the
securement.
the that strap technology, that sounds really interesting, because you've hauled flatbed, I'm sure, and you can't see the entire load and the straps. There's been times I'm like, see them go by and have no clue, or they're dragging half their tarp behind the trailer, and yeah. So
Yeah. Some of the bigger stuff I did, I got into cases where I was putting 3, 4, 30-foot by 30-foot strap or tarps over loads, and it's like, you need that many tarps on a load? Like, man, ain't nothing. It's not going to ride. It's going to be blowing everywhere. Luckily, I had pilot cars with me that were like, yeah, you're strapped. This is moving. Your tarp is coming off. But of course, we use mostly chains, so it's like, well, chains are all tight. Load ain't going nowhere, but everything else is blowing all over the place.
oh yeah, and that's the whole loose dunnage.
Yeah.
Or I stopped a truck one time, and he had tarped it, and the bungee cord had broken, and dropped the tarp to where it was blocking all the lights on the trailer.
Yep.
And so
He
at
doesn't
first,
know.
and he didn't have a clue. But then when I walk up and I go, "Hey, bud, why are you stopping me?" Okay, well, you want to start off like
Now
that?
you're gonna get an inspection.
Let's start off like that. Come here. Here's why I stopped you. And then, he
Yep.
fixes it, and then he's like, "Are you going to write me a violation?" I'm like, "Are you going to continue to be a jerk about this?" Like, yeah, give me your license and give me your paperwork, and let's go, But and again, I've always been, anything I do, I try to stay. Attitude is going to help you out. You try to approach something with a good attitude, you're gonna get rewarded. So
Yep. I had, I was probably a year or so in with working for Hunt way back in 2012, 2013. I had a DOT officer coming behind me on a side road out in Wyoming. He followed me for like 15 miles, and then I looked in my mirror. And when I looked in my mirror, I saw one of my bungees snap and drop the tarp onto the road, and he immediately turned it on. He's like, honestly, if I wouldn't have seen that happen, I would have written you a ticket. But since I saw it happen, I'm like, yeah, I had bungees in my hand. I'm like, yeah, I got to get that fixed. He's like, yeah. He's like, but that is the odds of seeing that actually happen, following you. And he's like, I wasn't even going to pull you over. I was just going. He said, I live like 15 miles up the road. I was just going home.
Yep, just going home. Exactly.
He's like, well, I mean, you had me watching my mirror.
Yeah.
But
yep.
But yeah, that's something that I've told people all the time is doing the big loads that I did. You get DOT inspections all the time. Like sometimes multiple times a day, you cross New York to Pennsylvania to Ohio. Each state's going to do another inspection on the truck. Even though you just got one that morning, they all want to do their own inspection. But overall, if you're polite, if you're friendly with the officer, don't make it be another chore that he has to deal with you. They work with you.
Look, when I was doing overweight for a company, I got pulled over so many times that they offered me a job for the state of Ohio. The officer.
Yeah.
They were like, "Look, man, why do you keep loading heavy?" I said, "That's the weight I gotta pull. We know we're going to be heavy on my axles. You know I'm going to be heavy on my axles. Let's just get this out of the way." So I still got like 6 or 7 overweight violations on my license. But I had so many, it was to the point where they just offered me a job. Like, you should really just apply to work for us at this point.
You spend so much time here.
Oh man, yeah,
might as well get paid for it.
It was to the point where we're talking about buying each other lunch and coffees, and like, well, I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow at noon, Bob. It was just to that point where we knew each other on a first name basis. They just pulled me over so many times.
Yep.
But I was always friendly. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, they're not there to wreck your life. Like Officer Hoover, if you were to pull me over, you're not there to wreck my life. You're there to encourage me to do better. You're there to help me learn. You're not there to mess up my day, right? And a lot of drivers, they need to understand that just because they get pulled over doesn't mean it's an end all. It's, like if Officer
Yeah.
Hoover pulls you over, more than likely it's going to be an educational benefit to you. He's going to teach you, hey, this is what you did wrong, and this is what you need to do to fix it. And if you do it this way, you're not going to get in trouble again. And if you get an out of service violation, at least you learn this time, so next time you come through here, it won't happen again. But Officer Hoover has a job to do, and if you violated regulations, he has to hold you accountable. And you, as a driver, have to understand if you don't follow regulations, you have to be held accountable, and you can't blame Officer Hoover or Indiana State Patrol or Ohio State Patrol or Pennsylvania State. You can't hold anybody accountable but yourself if you don't follow regulations. You literally have the same green book in your truck as everybody else. It's just a matter
Or you should.
or you should. It's just a matter of, are you going to read it? I mean, for example, you can follow FSSG on Facebook, and we literally mentor you on proper securement. It's that easy. You don't know how to secure a load. You take a picture, you put it on there. Within an hour, you have 30 answers, right?
Yep.
So there's help. You just got to find it, and you can avoid these citations. You can avoid these out of service violations, and hopefully give Officer Hoover here a break on the side of the road, so he can drink his coffee.
And it's also be proactive. I filled in this past week for a driver that was out. I don't usually run his trailer. I got on there. I'm like, okay, he's got some extra chains hanging up. I looked at him. I'm like, I'm going to grab my chain gauge. For those of you that do flatbed all the time, Brake Tech Tools has an awesome chain gauge. It'll tell you your go, no go, if your chains are good, if they're bad. I don't know how many years ago it was that Officer Hoover showed it in one of his videos, and I got him. But I got my gauge out real quick, and I checked it, and it's like, no, the chains were worn. They were just ever so slightly under the minimum that they had to have. But it's like, well, that driver probably doesn't even know that you have to check that from time to time.
Probably doesn't know the tool exists, to be honest.
Probably not. A lot of guys don't. But it's like, so I just sent a real quick message off to our safety team. I was like, hey, this trailer, I said I didn't need the chains for any of the loads this week, but he's got 3 chains on here that they need to be replaced. I tagged them that they're bad, and I let one of the other guys know that, hey, when you see the driver on Monday, make sure he's got the good chains up there. A lot of guys don't know that you have to be able to do that, and they will blame the company, but it falls to the driver to do those kinds of checks. It's not the company's job to check your chains. It's your job.
Exactly. And going back, kind of starting us back around what Dan was talking about, getting stopped. It's like literally had a driver that was upset that he got stopped, that, I chose to stop him. And I asked him, I said, do you not realize that you as a CDL driver, you have your own dedicated police force out here in this country, that our sole job is to stop and inspect commercial motor vehicles?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So didn't you think that this was going to happen at some point? And again, after talking to him a little bit, I think he had kind of had a bad run in somewhere, and it kind of left a sour, But again, and there's typically 2 types of stops that happens when it comes to commercial motor vehicles. It's the drivers have done something, whether it be speeding, following too close, unsafe lane move. We call them, on our side of the fence, we call them crash causation factors.
Yep.
So here in the state of Indiana, when our inspectors work overtime, they are looking for crash causation factors. So I had a driver one time ask me, he goes, I appreciate what you guys do, but how can I avoid you the right way? And it's like, drive safe, do your pre-trip, and other than that, it's going to be something random. As a driver, if you don't want to get stopped, don't speed. If you don't want to get stopped, don't follow that truck close enough that you can read the digits on who made the brake light. If you can
Yeah.
count how many chain links are on that rear, you're too close. So if you as a driver don't want to get stopped by us, I get it. You may not want to stop and visit with us, but try to keep in mind those are things that we're looking for. And then yes, if you come up into my neck of the woods and you drive by and you got a strap loose, I'm gonna stop and let you know about it. And then yes, we're gonna go through. And what you were talking about training and the chain gauge, you know, um, sadly, some companies they almost need to step it up just a little bit to inform the drivers, hey, these are things you need to be looking at. And then drivers need to take that and go, where can I go a step further? Whether it be, like your all's group, there's a lot of outstanding groups out there that are more than happy. And I love that you guys advertise, hey, you have a question, send a picture. You know, it sounds like you got some various DOT officers from around the country with different aspects. Um, Good drivers, trainers, they're going to get that correct information. So that's
Yeah.
exciting, and it's something that and I've even thrown this out here, and I let me bounce it off you guys being drivers. I've even said, hey, you don't know, pull into a scale house sometime. It's going to be a 50-50, but just say, hey, I'm new, I'm starting out, I have some questions. Can you assist me? And then of course everybody thinks, well, that's a trap. They're going to write you. They're going to ticket you. Well, here's the thing on that. Yes, there's always that possibility. But then again, if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you see that bear and you decide to go up and poke him in the nose, he could bite you or he could turn and run away. That's just life. That's the excitement of life. But the big thing is go in, ask these questions, and say, hey, I'm new to this. Can you help me out? What are things that you're looking? And a lot of places you're going to find that, yeah, you know, they'll give you some information, or they'll come out and say, do this differently. Look at this. Do this. Or the safe bet, search Facebook, search this group, find out.
Yeah.
Flatbed safety and securement group.
Yeah. It's the Flatbed Safety Securement Group. That's literally our name is what we do. We're trying to improve safety and securement knowledge within the industry. The other thing is, I mean, this would be kind of like if it would be what your opinion would be on this, but do you think it is kind of time that we start looking at making flatbed an endorsement? Like they argued for tanker being an endorsement because it requires such a unique driver skill set and knowledge and understanding. Are we at a point now where citing the point of, in the last couple of days, there's been what, 4 or 5 major bridge strikes with oversized loads where drivers clearly didn't know that they needed to check the height of the load. They needed permits for that load. Is it time that we actually sit down and say, hey, you know what? Maybe because of where our country's at, because of and I'm not saying this as a bad thing, just because of the amount of people we have, because of people coming into the industry and not realizing that there's so much involved with flatbed, is it time that we start looking at that as, hey, drivers need to have an endorsement. They need to go through some kind of a standard training to get a flatbed endorsement so they not understand these are the basics of doing flatbed.
I have not thought about that, and me personally, this is just me personally, I agree. I think that would be a very good beneficial thing. And I think that could easily be accomplished in an 8-hour class. I mean, you've taught load securement. I teach load securement on an inspector level. I think that an 8-hour course could easily be done to get a flatbed endorsement. I really like that idea,
And
that concept.
I even look at it. So I've been thinking about it for quite a few years, and I looked at it as they need to have training for flatbed, and then oversize is you can get into such bad situations with oversize if you don't understand how to read permits, how to handle it. Oversize is something that's like, you know what? Oversize should be, hey, you've got your flatbed. After a year with your flatbed, if you've been safe, you haven't had load shifts, you can take a test that basically just lays out, it teaches you this is how you, like, if the load goes over this size, you have to have a permit. If it's over this size, you have to have a permit. If it's like, just how to, you have to read your permit, you have to follow the route, and then make that endorsement as well. So that, and this is not to keep drivers out, but this is to make sure you can't just, the bigger your loads are, the heavier they are, you can't just turn them around. You can't just pull off route and, you know what, I missed a turn. You can't just turn around. That next exit might have construction. You can't get the load because of the width. You can't take that off ramp. Like, going through and teaching them, this is what you do in that situation. Like, just making it where we make sure that drivers are trained for the fields. Flatbed is at a point where you need to have that load securement training, but oversize, that driver in Texas that hit the bridge, I don't know how he hit a 16'9" bridge, but he was like every bit of 18 foot tall with an excavator on. And it's like that driver's career is pretty much done. He's destroyed a bridge. Nobody's going to want to employ him, and he didn't know what he didn't know.
Yeah, that would be interesting to find out, like, what, what are the backgrounds on that. But oh, absolutely. And everybody thinks, oh, well, now they just want an endorsement for this, they just want to restrict us. No, we just want to ensure that you've had a little bit of time to sit down and know that there's additional load securement rules, that there's additional things you need to be made aware of before you sign up and you do these things. So yeah, I think it would be, I think that would really be a good thing to see.
And like I said, it is not at all to say that we want to restrict the drivers. We want to kind of put restrictions on the companies that they can't just toss the driver the keys. What worked in the 70s and 80s of tossing a driver the keys and he'll figure it out by the time he gets to Colorado, that doesn't work anymore. We've got too much traffic. There's too much at play. There's too many things that are going on in the world. There needs to be protections for the driver, and that's why the tanker endorsement was put in place, was to make sure the drivers had a protection. Protect the drivers. I mean, it's what it comes down to. The companies aren't going to have an issue going on with, oh, that driver doesn't have a flatbed endorsement. It just becomes another thing that the driver needs to have. The driver, though, has to go out and get the training, which makes him safe, or at least provides the knowledge that if he wants to follow it or not, that's going to be up to him. It's his ticket. But he'll at least have the knowledge of this is what the job entails.
Oh, absolutely. And it's kind of like a specialization, you want to be more specialized as a CDL operator? Great. Go out and get those endorsements, add your flatbed, add your tanker, add your hazmat. Just like me as a trooper, I'm more specialized than the average bear because I've gone out and sought these additional certifications and things. So, and why do I seek those certifications? Not, but to be able to educate and do more. And every truck that I stop, deep down, I'm stopping that truck because I want that driver to go home. That driver's got a family. I've got a family. I patrol this area, and it's like my family drives these roads. And it's not because I thought, ooh, I want to write this guy a ticket. No, I want to ensure that this guy goes home. So yeah, it's that mentality of the Smokey and the Bandit. The Smokies are just out there to get you. Well, not all of us are out there to get you. We just want to make sure you get home. and
So
doing it
one of
right.
the things we did create, we call it the ITF. It's the Introduction to Flatbed, and the whole idea behind it is creating. It is actually now internationally accredited, so it actually counts as a college course. But it is creating a educational platform where we teach people this is what flatbed entails. Um, it is I can't remember how many hours. It's quite a few hours. We go
It's 16 hours long. It's 10 courses.
10 courses over 16 hours, but we go in depth with like this is the different types of trailers. This is what they're used for. This is things you have to consider as you're securing loads. We're working next on actual load securement. We want to cover as many flatbed loads as we can, but we're trying to put together a comprehensive place where drivers can go and companies, because let's be honest, TMC, Maverick, phenomenal training programs. They've sunk tens of millions of dollars into creating those training programs. Little carriers don't have that money. They don't have that kind of money to drop on a huge training course and a program. So we're wanting to set up an actual school where drivers can be sent by companies, or we can come out and eventually we'd like to have our own vehicle that we can bring a small assortment of types of loads that we can actually teach drivers. Go to companies and be like, hey, you've got new drivers. We can come out. We'll teach them this is load securement. This is what it actually entails. This is why you don't want to throw a chain. This is why you do this. This is how you the correct way to throw a strap so that you're not blowing your shoulder out. You're not throwing the hook when you don't have to. Even things like you never throw a hook, but I have hauled loads where they literally tell you you're going to have to throw the hook up to the top of the load because the hook has to be on top of the load. And it's like, so like even teaching drivers, like this is how you throw a strap when you've got to throw the hook. There's a way to do it that you're not going to hurt yourself and you're not going to risk hurting other people. So that's something that we've done, that we're trying to really focus on making the industry safer by focusing on one of the more dangerous parts of the industry, which is flatbed.
And that sounds phenomenal. My hat's off to you guys. That is awesome, because again, me as a law enforcement, as DOT, we just want to see things safer, and that sounds like, and I really like that concept, because you get something like that rolling and allow these smaller companies to be able to get that, put their drivers through that, and then they've got that certification. So yeah, any time you can improve safety, and you can improve safety through training versus, okay, the driver's really screwed up and got a ticket, or worse, there's been a crash, there's been an accident, now there's lawsuits, insurance, attorneys. It's all, how could this be prevented? And yeah, that is really a really, really awesome thing. So,
And we're not doing this just for trucks. Like we want this to be something that, hey, if you're going into one of my things, I'm actually in school right now for a degree in engineering, is I want to be able to go to shippers and be like, okay, you're designing this item. You're not taking into account it has to be shipped by a truck. So
exactly.
I want to help you with these are types of securement things that we can put on the load. This will be a temporary thing, or you can double purpose this. Take this, instead of it being a 2-inch bolt, move it up to a 3-inch bolt. Now we can put a shackle on it, so the driver has somewhere to secure stuff to. Like things like that. Teach brokers. A lot of people get into brokering loads. Like they don't know that, like, oh, this person's requesting this. Well, the weight seems like it should be easy for this to be hauled on this type of trailer. No, they're requesting this type of trailer because, yes, you can put a 55,000-pound, we'll say, telehandler on a flatbed or on a step deck. It'll just be overweight. But the step deck itself is not designed to have all that weight on the tires, all the way on the outer edge. there's a reason they're asking for the removable gooseneck trailer. It's because it's all steel. It's designed to haul a machine like that. It's like that way that way we will not see we'll see a reduction in trailers breaking in transit.
Exactly. Or the worst case, they've cracked and fell apart, and then that front end loader's sitting in the front seat of a minivan.
Yeah.
It's all um,
Our big thing is we want to see a day where there's no more load shifts. Just get to a point where there's no excuse for this load shifted, other than maybe catastrophic accident where the trailer's ripped in half by the events of an accident. Your chains did what they could.
yeah, and make the load securement stupid simple. Like, it's so simple that it's stupid. Or I really like that concept, because I've seen different things where like had to stop this oversized load. He was hauling like 75 feet long pieces of rebar, and they were in these big bundles. And when you read the regulation, it states that if you got these bundles sitting side by side by side, you have to have something. Either they got to be in contact, or there's got to be something to prevent them from moving inward. And their argument was, well, they don't put them close together because they got to get strapped. So I asked the driver, I said, well, take you a 4x4, cut it down, use some scrap, make you a handle, drop them down in there, have them push them together. Now they're not going to come in together. Your straps aren't going to get loose. And he goes, that's a really good idea. And ironically, about a year later, I stopped him again, and he had done that. And I said, hey, I said, I like your blocking back here. And he goes, yeah, this trooper told me about it. And that's been a really good. And I just kind of chuckled, and I go, yeah, I think I've heard of the guy. I was wearing a coat, and he didn't know who I was. And of course, I probably gave away my $1 million idea, but I was just pleased that somebody had used it. But it's just simple things like that. Like, make you an item that it's so simple and easy to use, just like that Century, strap thing. That's a great idea. Make those things part of the truck. Advance it further to where it communicates with the truck, to where now you got a warning on your dash that says load securement, or loose cargo, or something flashes, and then you go, oh, I got something I need to go back there and check. So
like it's I'm an advocate. I'm not an advocate for wild technology throughout the industry. I am a huge advocate, though, for the intelligent implementation of technology. Look at where technology can truly help and implement it.
Oh, absolutely. And that technology on both sides of the field. I mean, as far as you look at, like, when we check low air pressure warning, how the whole dash illuminates red, and it's no longer just a little light or a little buzzer. But no, that's awesome.
Well, Officer Hoover, it's been a pleasure. We're going to let you go. I'm sure you're a busy man. You got to get out and find some nice Peterbilts to look at.
Well, the weather is getting nicer, so I definitely
you're going to start seeing them out.
Heck yeah. So,
hey, I don't know if you ever get down there, but if you get a chance to go down to MATS this year, Mid-America Truck Show, they're going to have some interesting vehicles down there this year.
Oh, really?
Scania's going to have their truck down there.
I tell you what, I on YouTube, there was a guy that imported a Scania, and he was going through some of the different stuff, and that's pretty darn neat.
So he will have it. That's Bruce Wilson. He will actually have it down there that whole week leading up to Mid-America Truck Show at the end of the month. I believe he said the Monday before the show starts, he's going to be doing test drives if you want to go down and take it for a spin.
Really?
He
I
got.
wonder
He got
if I wear my uniform, if I can cut the line.
You might be able to.
Official business.
It's official business. You're there to analyze the technology for Indiana DOT.
Tell them you have to do an inspection.
I know. Say, hey, let's do an inspection on that thing. I was at an event, and they say, you kind of remind us of Sheriff Buford T. Justice, and I said, and I was cracking up, kind of quoted some lines, and I said, after I retire, I'll have to go from a blue uniform to a brown and find me one of them old cars and cut the top off and go do reenactments. So they got to get out of that. But no, thank you guys very much. Appreciate your time today. Appreciate the invite to sit in and chat with you guys, and just look forward to working with you guys on the Facebook page and questions, and just look forward to following along and seeing what you guys got planned. I feel like you got a really good grasp, and I really applaud the commitment and time you guys are putting into this. So thank you.
Hey, and thank you for trying to keep us all safer out there and educating us. I mean, it was greatly appreciated when I first started driving, being able to find people who would actually educate.
I'm just gonna put this out there, Officer Hoover. I've been trying to get pulled over by you, but for 7 years. No dice. I've been
no dice.
No.
Well, see, you were behaving, I guess, or I've just been even more busy. So I've had several text messages like that. I had to laugh. I was with another inspector, and somebody had said, "Hey, are you out working today? I want you to stop me." And I said, "How many of those texts do you get?" And he goes, "I've never gotten one of those." And I'm like, "Yeah, I probably know why." But
I
yeah.
I had one time out in Wyoming when I was running that prototype trailer or test trailer out there. I had one time I pulled across the pit to get inspected. All of the axles on the trailer steered, so they all had their own kingpins, bushings, tie rods. I pulled over it, and the officer, I could hear a holler from out from under the trailer. He's like, "What am I looking at?" And I told him.
Yeah.
He's like, "How does this work?" I told him. He's like, I will retire before I'm done with this inspection, so I'm just gonna let you go because this looks like a brand new trailer. I was like, "Yeah, it's its second load, so it's brand new."
Pretty new.
He's like, "Have a good day."
Have a good day. Yeah, I'll go pick another.
Something that's not going to be hours on end of just, okay, turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right.
That's cool.
All right, guys.
Been a great conversation. Once again, those of you that are looking for any kind of education on flatbeds, open deck, and technologies, even if you have technology you want to propose to us, find us on Flatbed Safety Securement Group on almost all your social media platforms, I believe. We might not have a MySpace page. I don't know.
No, I think we got rid of that in 2007.
I keep hearing they're wanting to bring it back. They're wanting music now on the Facebook pages. I'm like, we have MySpace. It wasn't that great.
So if anybody listens to this, they got some technology they're interested in introducing to the flatbed industry, we do have some contacts. Reach out to me or Mr. Kinsman by emailing dShipley@flatbed-safety.com or dkinsman@flatbed-safety.com. And then we can discuss what kind of ideas you have, or go to our Facebook page, Flatbed Safety and Securement Group. The "and" is assigned, not the word "and," but the sign "and." And you can find us on there. You can send us a direct message, or get back with us very soon. Any parting words, Officer Hoover, before we end the podcast?
Nope. Be safe. If you don't want to get stopped, follow the rules of the road. Do your pre-trip. Be safe, and just think about your safety and others. And everybody, be careful out there. Thanks again for having me on.
All right.
Sounds very good. Well.